Hello my lovely crafters, this is Crafty Sue 519. Welcome to my channel and to my very late Tea Tuesday. Oh, it's been a crazy day. Been trying to get to this, but one thing after another, but here I am finally. This is going to be a little bit of an unusual story. I don't know why, but my mother has been on my mind. It even woke me up this morning, and I thought I would tell you about her a little bit. It's hard. It's a little hard to talk about. On August 14th, 1978, my mother suffered a cerebral hemorrhage. I got a phone call. I was at a party at my dad's. My parents were divorced. I was at a party at my dad's. We had a big family outing at my dad's house every year, and we were at that. And I got a phone call that she was in a hospital and I better go there right away. When I arrived, there was a priest in her room giving her last rites. And I was so angry because there was no way that my mother could be dying, because I had just spoken to her a couple hours before that. And I kicked the priest out. I said, no, you're not doing that. And he did leave. And the doctor came in and explained to me that she was suffering from a cerebral hemorrhage. And she was yelling, it hurts. And she was transferred to another hospital because the hospital in our city did not have brain surgeons. And the hemorrhage did not kill her. She survived it. It took 2 months in the hospital before she was strong enough, I guess, for surgery. Oh gosh. And it's not, I don't want you to feel sad about this. It was a very, very, very difficult time in my life. I was pregnant. I was 5 months pregnant with my second son at the time, and my older brother and sister went behind my back and made me her legal guardian, gave me power of attorney. So every time the hospital needed to do something, they called me, or I had to run to the hospital, which was quite a ways from my house where I was living at the time. And it was just a crazy time. It was, very nerve-wracking. Anyhow, she would speak once in a while. Through this whole ordeal, I never knew quite if she understood what I was saying to her or what she would say back once in a while. But in the year that she lived, and yes, she lived for a year, she did some funny stuff. So I'm going to tell you the funny things that happened in my mom's last year. So, my friend and I had gone to visit her at this hospital one day. She was at Roger Williams Hospital in Providence, Rhode Island. And we were just standing there talking, and she was laughing and not saying too much. She never did speak much after this had happened, but she was laughing, and she looked at my friend and said to her, I'm going to go out with your husband. And my friend said, what? And she goes, yep, I'm going out with your husband. And, and it was the funniest thing. And they went back and forth on this, and Jeannie was like, no, you're not. You're not going out with my husband. Oh, yes, I am, my mother would say. Yes, I am. It was funny. She was still flirting. Oh, gosh. And then she looked at me, and she said, I want a bud. My mother liked beer. She wasn't a lush. She did not drink. I don't think I ever seen my mother intoxicated, but she liked to have a beer. And her beer was Budweiser. And she kept looking at me and she says, I want a bud. And she was insistent about it. So I talked to her. Her doctor would call me twice a day. And I said to him, she keeps asking for a beer. She wants a bud. He said, bring it to her. Bring it to her. Let her have it. So I did. One day I went in and opened up a bottle of bud and poured some into a paper cup for her and gave it to her. And oh, she was like in heaven. She had her bud. So I'm glad I could do that for her. So finally came the time where we got a neurosurgeon, and he was going to go in and repair the aneurysm that had burst. And it was nerve-wracking. We didn't know if she'd survive the surgery, but there was a chance that she would have another cerebral hemorrhage because of that aneurysm. So, my brother came from New York, and my sister was there. My younger brother was there, and we sat and waited for hours while I did this surgery. And the surgeon called me from the recovery room, and he said, Sue, you're not going to believe it. Your mother is laying here talking up a storm. I said, what? He says, she won't shut up. We did the surgery. Everything went well. She's talking to everybody. He says, I can't believe it. He says, it was like an instant cure, and she's doing fantastic. So when they brought her down to her room, I went in and was sitting with her, and a plane flew over the hospital. And just out of nowhere, I said, what was that? And she looked at me like I was the most stupid person in the world and said, it's a plane. It's a plane. I was so thrilled. I was so thrilled that she knew what it was. Oh, unless you go through something like this with a parent, someone who has Alzheimer's, someone who's suffered a stroke and cannot speak or whatever, that's the slightest little thing makes you so happy. And I was thrilled that she recognized that it was a plane and let me know in no uncertain terms that that's what it was. By the way, since it's so late in the day, I'm drinking iced tea, diet iced tea, diet ice sweet tea. I've already gone through one of these glasses because when I was going to make this video earlier, my son called me and we talked for over an hour and a half. Thus I'm late. So, as it is with anybody, insurance will only pay for you to be in the hospital for so long, right? I'm going ahead of myself. A week after she told me she had that was a plane that was out there, I got a call from her doctor telling me that my mother had suffered a severe stroke. She was paralyzed. And boy, what this lady went through, you would not believe. I don't know how she survived it all. Oh, it was tough. It was tough. And I don't even want to remember those days. But she somehow pulled through that. She was paralyzed for the rest of her life, but she couldn't speak very well, if at all. And the insurance was on me to get her out of the hospital because they would only allow them in the hospital for 3 months back then. This was in 1978. So I remember my mother telling me all the time that when she first went into the hospital, it was very strange. She would say to me, don't send me to Zambarano, don't send me to Zambarano. So it made me know that she kind of knew what was going on because Zambarano was a state nursing home and she didn't want to go there. So when I was told that I had to find some place to transfer her to, I was calling everywhere, and no one would take her. They wouldn't take her because we had no money and because she was paralyzed. They didn't want to have to deal with a paralyzed patient. And of course, they weren't going to make any money because she was on Medicare and Medicaid, and there was no money to be had. She had no money in the bank. I had no money. I was young. I was 26 years old. I was pregnant with my second child. We didn't have anything. So the only place she could go was Zambarano. And it bugs me to this day. To this day, it bothers me. 42 years later, it still bothers me. But what could we do? We had to find a place for her. So they transferred her to Zambarano. And Christmas came. Now, when they did the surgery, they shaved her head. And they took out a big piece of bone in her skull, which was right on the side of her head, right above her eye. So she had this big dent in her head. So I bought her a wig, because my mother was very vain. She was a very vain lady. She had to be so-so. This is my mom. This is my mom and me. Many, many years ago. I was 20 in this picture, so this is 49 years ago. That's my mom, and this was at a bridal shower for me. But I never married the guy. We broke up a month before the wedding. But I like this picture of us together. And I like that I'm so skinny in the picture. Oh, gosh. So I bought her a wig, and I bought her a pretty bathrobe. And I didn't like seeing her in those hospital Johnnies all the time. It just wasn't her. And I would come sometimes and put lipstick on her because I knew that's what she would want. That's how she was. She was very flamboyant in her dress. She was always in nice bright colors, and she was the life of the party. She was not a quiet lady. She was not a quiet lady. And yeah, she was something. Grumpy and her would have gotten along really well. They would have really liked each other. So Christmas comes, and a couple of my sisters and my brother and my nephew, we go to the hospital, and I didn't get her out of the bed, but I had the nurses get her out of the bed, and I had her in her new bathrobe and her wig, and had her decked out, and I brought her downstairs. This was a huge building. It was actually in a nice area. It was on a lake and out in the country, and but it wasn't the greatest place for someone to be. The care there was not the greatest. But I got her all dressed up, and I went downstairs with her to this big room where everybody was waiting to see her, and she was smiling and happy. And my husband at the time, Vic, was out in the hallway with my son Jay, who was only 2 years old, and my son Jeff had just been born. He was born on December 5th. So it was the day that she was going to meet her second grandson. So I'm standing there holding my baby, and my older son, Jay, who is 2.5 at this point, comes running in the room, stops, looks at my mom, and yells out, "Meme!" And she perked right up, and she looked at my son, and she cried out, "Babe!" Because that's what she always called him. Oh, talk about touching your heart. Oh my gosh. And my son ran to her and jumped up on her and sat on her lap like he didn't know anything had happened to her. That was his meme. And she, with her good arm, was holding on to him and smiling like crazy. I think that's what I miss the most about her, is that she never really got to know my children. They never got to know her. So she got to meet Jeffrey, my new baby, which was nice. And do have pictures someplace, but I don't like looking at them because it didn't look like my mother, you know. So anyways, that was a happy thing. That was a happy thing that she recognized him and let me know there was hope in there someplace, that she was understanding some things, and she would say some things now and again. Not too often, but every now and again she would say something. And it was coherent. It was cool. At this place, they had little things that they would do for patients that were able to get out of bed and stuff. And one thing that they did every other week or something like that was bingo. And they would bring patients down to this room and they would play bingo with them, and they would win toiletries and a brush or you know, little things like that they could use while they were there. And my mom loved to play bingo, loved to play bingo. So I called the nurses one morning and said, I'm coming up to get my mother and I'm taking her down to the bingo game, so get her ready. So they did, and when I got there, she was in the wheelchair sitting, and I said, Mom, we're going to go play bingo. And we went down to that room, and it was filled with the patients that wanted to play bingo, and all the little prizes were on the table for whoever won bingo. And they had these special little bingo cards where you would just slide this little plastic piece and it would cover the number if they called it. You didn't play with, you know, bingo chips or whatever they were called back then. And now everything's with ink and paper, but this is way back in 1978, so, or 79 by this time. They didn't have that then. So we're playing bingo, and I noticed that we only needed one number to win. And I said, Mom, look, you know, one number and we win bingo. And she's smiling, and she's not talking, but she's smiling and having a good time. I could tell she was having a good time. So they call a couple numbers, and I feel something hit my arm, and I turned, and it was my mother. She smacked me on the arm, and then she looked down at the bingo card, and I looked down, and we had bingo. So I called out bingo. And my mother started laughing. She started, little stinker, she started laughing. She had reached over and pushed that little slider to make it look like we had bingo, and we never did. Totally embarrassed me, and she got the biggest kick out of that. She just laughed like crazy. It's a good memory, it really is. All those little things that she would do now and again would just let me know that she was still in there. She was still there. And it was comforting. It was very comforting. Oh, gosh. My dad and her divorced when I was 12. And they always stayed friends. They always lived close to one another. It was very weird. We always lived across the street. When my parents divorced, there was me and my younger brother. All my other brothers and sisters were already out of the house, married, and kids of their own. But when it was time to leave, my mother had got an apartment across the street from my father. And I remember whoever was moving us, my brother and I shared a bedroom at the time. And they were taking our beds out of the room, and my brother did not want to go. He didn't want to leave my father. He didn't want my father to be alone. And he hung onto his bed, screaming he didn't want to go, he didn't want to go, he didn't want to go. So my mother asked him, do you really want to stay with your dad? And he said yes. So she turned and looked at my father and said, do you want him to stay with you? And my dad said yes. So that was it. Not only were my parents divorced, but I got separated from my brother. My brother stayed with my dad, and I went with my mom. But they always stayed friends. They always stayed friends. So for holidays, we were always together. Maybe that's why my ex-husband and I are still friends, because my parents were always friends. But one thing my dad would not do was go visit her in a hospital. He would not do it. He did not like hospitals. His first wife passed away when she was only 32 years old of, I believe, it's either uterine or ovarian cancer. And I think he was traumatized by that and never wanted to go in hospitals after that. And I would bug him every now and again. I said, why don't you come see Mom? You know, I don't know how much time she has left, and, you know, it would be nice if you saw her. And finally, one day he agreed. So we drove out to Zambarano, and I'm going to say a word that I probably should not say, but if I don't say it, you're not going to get the gist of the story. But we went into her room, and when she saw my father, her face just lit up. It lit up. And he was standing by her bed and took her hand and was patting her hand and saying, "Hi, Connie, how are you doing?" And she was just smiling, looking up at him. And it was just so sweet seeing this. And my father, he looked at her and said, "Do you know who I am?" And she said, "Yes." And he says, "Well, who am I?" Excuse my language. And she looked up at him and said, "You're Mr. Shit." Oh, gosh. And she laughed. She laughed. And my father, still holding her hand and patting her hand, said, "Well, if I'm Mr. Shit, then that must make you Mrs. Shit." And they both laughed. Oh, it was great. It was great. I will never forget that as long as I live. It was just so funny. Oh, gosh. I know these are my memories and not yours, and they're funny to me and perhaps not you, but oh, God. Even as she lay there in that horrible condition, and she still had a sense of humor, and I so admired that. So anyhow, my father never went back to see her again after that. And her health declined and declined, and I went to see her one day, and now we're past a year that she's been like this. And she wasn't responding to much of anything at this point. And so I just sat there and I held her hand and I said, "Mom, it's okay. You can let go. You can go. It's okay." And I prayed to God to take her. I said, enough. You know, a year she's been like this, and it's time for her to go. It's time for her to go. Please take her. And 4 days later, on August 28th, 1979, my mom passed. And I was happy. I was happy. I was not happy that I didn't have a mother anymore. I was happy that she wasn't suffering anymore. Because I knew she wasn't who she wanted to be. I knew that. Any of you who have had to bury a parent or a loved one or anything, you know, you have to go through that whole rigmarole of going to the funeral parlor. And this is back in 1979, so, you know, Catholics, we did not get cremated. So you have to go to the funeral parlor and pick out a coffin and all that stuff. Well, I had to make sure that hers was beautiful. So I picked out a pinky mauve colored coffin. And I had to touch the fabric. For some reason that bothered me, because some had fabric that the person would lie on that was rough. And I know that they wouldn't feel it, but I could feel it. And I didn't want that for my mother. So I found this really pretty mauve pink colored coffin. It was very pretty. And it's so soft inside, just so soft. So I knew that's what I had to get for her. And I picked that. And then the person at the funeral parlor said, "Well, you have to pick out something for her to wear." And I said, well, she doesn't have any clothes left. You know, she's been in the hospital, a nursing home for a year. And he says, well, we have dresses here that you can pick to put on her. And he brought out these frumpy old dresses. They were horrible. They were lacy. They were so not my mother. My mother loved color. She would have haunted me for the rest of my life if I put her in one of those dresses. So I said, I'm going to go out and buy something for her, and I'll bring it to you. So while I was out, now her hair had grown back in, and it was like a salt and pepper color. And my mother, as you can see in this picture, look how pretty, look how bright she is. Her hair's blonde here. Mom liked to change her hair color. She went from brunette to blonde to redheads. She was something. Oh, gosh. So I called her friend that was her hairdresser, and I said, do you ever go to funeral parlors and fix people's hair? And she goes, yeah. I said, well, Mom passed away, and would you do her hair? Because you always did her hair. And she goes, yeah, what do you want to do? And I said, just fix it like you always did, but it needs to be dyed. I said, it's salt and pepper, and it's not her. She would be mortified to have hair that color. So she goes, no. She says, I'll do it blonde like she was before she got sick. And I said, told her about that indentation in her head. And I said, can you comb it down so it covers that so people don't see that? And she goes, yep. She says, I'll fix her up pretty. And I said, you got to put lipstick on her? And she goes, yep, I will. I know how Connie was, how she liked to look. So that was awesome that she did that for me. And I went out and I looked for something that was my mom. And I came back, and I think the funeral director almost passed out when he saw the clothes I brought back, because I came back with hot pink pants and a blouse with all kinds of colors in it, very bright, all kinds of colors. Had a tie at the top, you know, it would tie up into a bow at the neck. And it was her style. It's how she used to like to dress. And I said, this is my mom. This is what I want to see her in. And I even bought her little hot pink earrings, round plastic earrings. But she loved that stuff. And I knew she'd be happy. I knew she'd be happy that I had made her again. And before we had the wake, the funeral director had called me and he says, do you want to come and see your mom first before, you know, the wake happens and everybody can come in to see her? And he said, well, tea. And I said, yeah, yes, I'd like that. And I went with my husband and I walked into the room. She was lying there. And for the first time in over a year, I saw my mom. Her friend did a fantastic job with her hair. And she had lipstick and her pink earrings and her bright blouse and her pink pants. And oh, she looked beautiful. She looked beautiful. She looked like Connie. She looked like who everybody knew. And that's how I wanted people to remember her. And that was it. So it's been 42 years. Still miss her. Still miss her. I don't think you ever stop. Maybe because it's the holiday time. She's on my mind more. I wish my boys knew her. That's my biggest regret. That's my biggest regret. Sorry if this was a downer, but this has been in my mind all day, and I said I just have to get it out. I have to tell these stories. I have to tell people about my crazy mom, my flirty mother, who liked to drink beer. Not to excess, never to excess. And yeah, she was something. She was something. Nancy, if you're watching this video, you can leave a comment below. You knew my mother really well. And you can second everything that I've had to say about her. You've had experiences at Zambarano with her too. So, all right, everybody. I'm wishing you all a very, very, very happy Thanksgiving. Sorry this was so long. I think I needed to do this more for me than anything, but I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day with your family, and we'll talk again soon. I love you. Bye.